Half of my studio is a gallery, so I have framed photos on the wall of my work. I'm constantly trying to get my brand out there and show people how it can work for them.
Welcome back to Meet Bridget, a show that sheds light on the often untold teenage and young adult stories of successful women from all types of backgrounds and in all sorts of careers. This show is an extension of Meet Bridget, which is a confidence coaching service for young women. I'm Asha, and I co-host this show alongside my best friend and our COO, Kashia Rosenberg. If you're new here, this is season 4 of Meet Bridget, and today we are thrilled for you to meet professional family, lifestyle, and landscape photographer Ariane Moshayedi. Ari is the founder and owner of ARIMO Photo, ARIMO if you're searching her Southern California photography business. Ari didn't always know she would be a photographer, but serving people has always been at the heart of what she does. She graduated from UCSB before receiving 2 master's degrees from NYU in social work and educational leadership. She wanted to go into education as a school principal, but after a few years working as a high school social worker, middle school teacher, and intern assistant principal, she picked up a camera for fun and instantly fell in love. Self-taught in film and digital photography, Ari started as a wedding photographer over 15 years ago and has since transitioned to family and landscape photography. What started as a passion project became a multifaceted photography and fine art business. Ari offers in-studio portraiture and outdoor sessions in Southern California, as well as selling luxury photography prints and custom aerial photography through the fine art side of her business. Ari's goal with everything she does is to empower people to feel beautiful, confident, and comfortable in their own skin. She makes art to create beauty in people's homes, lives, and legacies. As we launch our brand new Meet Bridget online coaching services this March in 2024, we hired Ari to shoot our rebrand photography. She poured over the Pinterest inspiration that we sent her, and she totally nailed the feel and the look that we were going for. So I'm so excited to take it back to the beginning. Welcome, Ari, to Meet Bridget.
Thank you so much, Asha. What an introduction. I feel very special and very honored to be here.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you. It was magical the way that things kind of came together. We were really looking for a photographer, and I feel like it was one of those moments when you're kind of in flow, like the right people and resources just come as solutions, and you were one of those. And I felt like from the moment we sent over what we were kind of visualizing, and you just clicked with it and got it. Keisha and I can kind of have our heads in the clouds a little bit when we're dreaming up the next phase of things we want to do. And I feel like you met us where we were, and the outcome was so great. We were like, this is exactly us and exactly what we felt. So I just wanted to, in the process of working with you, I observed how professional and beautiful your work and your business are. So I'm excited to get into all the details with you and take it back to your childhood. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up. I can't wait.
So I'm a first generation American. My dad is Iranian. My mother was born and raised in Peru. They met in London at university, and then they moved to New York and had my sister and I. My mom was the head tour guide for the United Nations, and my dad was getting his master's in structural engineering. And when I was pretty young, probably 3, my whole family moved to Newport Beach. And that's where I grew up. And I love to say that I was born and raised in New York, but I wasn't really raised there. I was born there, and I love that claim to fame, especially because that's where part of my journey ended up. So I have a brother and a sister. I'm the oldest, and we grew up right here in Newport. We went to an elementary school on the beach, which was, what a life. We would ride our bikes to school. My mom's whole family lived in Spain. So annually we would go and visit all my cousins out there. Spanish was my first language, and I speak Spanish to my own children now, which also another privilege that you just don't realize growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we went to elementary school on the beach, and then we transferred to a different elementary school also in Newport Beach. And so I had 2 different sets of friends, which at that age, you don't understand, what the power of that is until you're much older. For me, it was like, oh my gosh, I lost all my best friends. And then you just make new friends. It was a really blessed childhood, I would say.
Yeah. You can already tell, though, in even just reading through your information and putting together your intro, You're clearly a very educated person from a family that very much valued education, but not just like going to school and getting a degree, but really like a global sense of the world. Can you tell us a little bit about like were there any philosophies or just sort of worldviews that your parents instilled in you from a young age?
They were very much like, when we go on vacation, we're going to go somewhere where you wouldn't go, you're not just gonna go to Hawaii every year.
Mhm.
So we would go to China, we would go to parts of Europe, we would go, and it was like we didn't understand at the time that this was such a blessing and so, exciting. We're like, "Whoa, they went to Hawaii." I'm like, "Well, you went to Spain,"
Yeah.
things like that. You just don't realize at that age how lucky you are. And for us, going to Spain every year, seeing cousins, that was our normal. That was like an extension of, oh, we're just gonna go to their house for Christmas, but it happens to be in a different country. It was just so much ingrained in our life. All those traditions, and to have such a worldly family. I mean, my mom was raised in Peru, then moved to Spain when she was a teenager. Her brothers and sisters lived in Spain still. Her dad was Estonian. So, I mean, she made sure that we were culturally educated and where we knew where we came from. From my dad's side, they were all here in Newport Beach, and so we grew up really close to our grandparents. We celebrated Persian New Year and still do. It's just really special to have two different upbringings. Essentially, this is for me it's so special because now I get to expose my own children to that. My own children get to go through Persian New Year. My We went to Spain for the first time last summer, and they got to meet my cousin's children. And so for me, it's like watching myself all over again,
Mhm.
and now getting to appreciate it.
Well, I think that's so fascinating, especially having, multicultural marriage to look to as from your parents. I feel like where we live here in Newport, there is some diversity, but on the whole, there are definitely settings where diversity is scarce. When you were a kid, did you have a sense of how unique it was where your parents were from, how they met, and how they were sort of raising you?
I don't think it was ever really brought to my attention. I think because we came from a community that was very like, I looked like everyone else, and
Mhm.
so I never thought of myself as different. I just knew that this was my life and this is my upbringing. And of course, when kids would come over and we'd expose them to different foods, that was when I was like, "What? You don't normally drink this? You don't
Yeah.
normally eat this at your house?" That's kind of where it was like, "Oh, okay, we're a little different." Or when my mom would speak Spanish to me at school, or the things that we would, say to our family in front of friends, they'd be like, "You know how to speak a language?" For that's where it really shone for us.
Well, and what a gift to be able to have Spanish as a first language just during that period of life when you're just a sponge. It's so much harder to learn a second language later. So for your parents to really give you that gift and for you to pass it on to your kids is so amazing. So you also have 3 kids, right?
Yes. So I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and all of them had Spanish as a first language, but as soon as they entered preschool, the Spanish was gone.
Yeah.
So they understand me very clearly, but they will not speak it back to me, unfortunately. And you can try as much as you want, but I think that it's just something that as they get older, they'll appreciate it more. And I think in high school, when they take Spanish classes, it'll come easy to them because it came easy to me. But I didn't learn, how to write properly. I didn't learn the grammar. So for me, Spanish class was fun because I understood everything. But when it came to the testing part, it was the tricky part.
Yeah,
So I appreciated the fact that I could speak it, and I still use it in my daily life. And I appreciate the fact that my children have been exposed to it. Farsi was something that we never picked up. Unfortunately, I wish I had, but we just did not speak Farsi at home. And so now at this age, I wish I had because it would be so much easier to, communicate with family members. But I understand the good things, the bad things, and most of the food. So I think that's pretty good.
exactly. That's kinda how I feel about my Indian side. I mean, so much of the culture, I feel like, is almost another language, right? Where you just you understand the holidays and the way families work and the gatherings and stuff. It's just a different learning, that I do feel like I received, but the language, I'm like, "Oh, how cool would it be to, be able to speak in one of the Indian languages my mom speaks in?" But at this point, I'm like, "Well, it's probably not gonna happen for me." Who knows? Life, it could be. a long journey. We'll see. That's so cool. Do you come from like a bigger extended family or is it smaller?
Yes. So my mom is one of four, and of those four, there are nine cousins,
Oh,
and we communicate every week. It feels like they live here because we're very well connected. And then of those nine, there are now 17 great grandchildren,
that's
and they're all within the age range of my children. And it's just so special because that's exactly how I grew up with my cousins. And so to be able to see this generation kind of progress and watch when the cousins, for example, my children understood Spanish but couldn't speak Spanish. So when they met, they just functioned based on, you want to play this, and and yeah, they all understood each other without speaking. My kids would listen to the Spanish, they would understand what they were saying, and but then they would respond in English, and somehow it worked. And it was just really magical to watch that, because I imagine it was the same for my parents and my aunts and uncles for when we were younger and how we grew up together. And I just think that was just instilled in us in a very early age. My grandparents would come to Orange County every summer for the last 30 years. And we would see them. So, if for us that was so often, we never felt like we were extended. It felt like we were just immediate.
awesome.
So it's just very special. And the idea of family is just very important to me. And I was close to my grandparents until now. I mean, I have one left now, but they were just such a solid foundation for both sides of the family that now with my kids, watching them with my parents, it's just so important to me to have that relationship continue, because that's how it was for me and my grandparents.
Your grandparents on both sides, where did they live?
On both sides. Yeah. So my Persian grandparents lived right here, right next to us, in Newport. And then my Spanish grandparents obviously lived in Madrid, Spain. So they would come in the summer for a few months, and then we would see them for Christmas time. And so for us, it felt like we saw them so often and we were so close to them. And with my dad's parents being so close as well, we would see them, I mean, weekly. So it always felt like we had our grandparents around us, and they always knew what was going on with us at school, and we just always keep in touch with them.
That is so cool.
It's unfortunately not something that's common, which I'm finding. It's also now at this age, watching my kids with my parents, it's interesting when my friends don't have that same experience. They don't have parents that are hands on. And so for me, it's hard to describe how just empowering it is to have a set of parents who are just so involved in your life and your kids' lives.
Yeah. I feel like that's, potentially cultural too. Some differences like, on my mom's side, the Indian side, it's like grandparents, like the generations are so plugged in. My parents don't live locally here, but even just like mentally, the presence in our life and how included, and it's like the family events and everything, they're non-negotiable. It's part of just sort of the way I see the world, and
Exactly.
therefore how, our kids will be raised to see the world. So cool that you were able to grow up with that and that it's something you're able to, continue to pass to your kids. So you have two siblings, you're the oldest. Do you feel like you are like classic oldest child in any ways?
Yes, I mean, I led the way. My siblings and I, we were all very different.
Yeah.
We all had very different interests. My sister was competitive. She knew she wanted to go to a great school. My brother was not as competitive, and I was probably the least competitive. So when I did high school sports, I did basketball, water polo, sailing. I was never the one that was like, oh, she's going to go places with sports. And I knew that right away. It was fine. So when I got into UC Santa Barbara, I was so excited to have gotten into school in general. I applied all over the country, and Santa Barbara just was the closest fit to what I wanted in a school. It was right by the water, it was coastal, it was close to home, but not too close. My sister ended up going to Columbia, so I mean, far different than me. And then my brother went to a state school. And so we were all very different. I think we all honed our interests in different ways. And I went to UCSB. I relied on being, just naturally smart, and that did not go well for me.
Mhm.
I had a lot of fun in college. I actually ended up on academic probation.
Oh, wow.
And for academic probation, you have to write a letter for the school to reinstate you. And so I did this all on my own. And I'll never forget, because I didn't tell my parents. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm going to fix this." And I'll never forget, my mom called me and she says, I got a letter and it said, thank you for your letter of reinstate or, to get reinstated. And all she had to say was that. I already knew that was it. There was no anger, there was no fighting. She just had to tell me that. I knew exactly, I knew that they both knew, and I knew they were disappointed. I worked my butt off that summer, took 4 classes, got straight A's, and just basically, changed my lifestyle in college. And I realized you just can't rely on natural intelligence. You have to actually work towards what you want. That was probably one of the first times where I was like, I have a goal, I'm going to meet it, and that's it. And I realized, wow, I'm capable and I can do this. While I was in college, one of the reasons that attributed to my academic probation was that I actually worked full time without needing to. I didn't need to have a job, but I did, and I really enjoyed it. But I was working 30-hour weeks with a full school load, and obviously something had to give. So that kind of attributed it to my academic probation at that time. But I ended up graduating with 3.7 and was pretty successful by the end of college. But it was one of those things. I mean, not many people know that about me. It's definitely not something that my family shares, but I think it's important because many students go into college not having the groundwork or knowing how to survive college the first or second year. And for me, just getting that kick was all I needed. That was it. That kind of just changed my life.
Well, and what I'm already hearing from your story, it seems like you are very much a person that can like see the way something's going, recognize what you like, what you don't like, what you want to keep, and then like, fix it and move on or change directions and pivot without really having to, self critique and like waste time in that place. It's like, okay, no, something's wrong or I don't like this. I'm going to change my course a little bit. And I also really respect, I mean, having a job while you're in college is a lot. I wanna go into a little bit, you said that you didn't need to work, during college, which isn't, I mean, that's not a situation for everybody. There are plenty of people that have to work through their entire lives. But can you tell us a little bit about like that? Because I think not having to work is a blessing, but it also can stifle motivation a little bit, where you have to kind of find it in yourself or have another reason to work. Can you tell me a little bit about that part of your motivation?
Yeah, so I actually got a job at 16 while still in high school because my parents always wanted us to know the value of a dollar. And so I started working in high school. That's how I made, my spending money. And so when that same business opened a spot in Santa Barbara, they asked me to work there. And I thought, well, how amazing. Of course I'll do that. I can do that, no problem. But I come from Newport Beach. It's a very affluent community. I didn't ever have an issue with money or finances. And so going into a college situation where I'm meeting kids from all over California and other parts of the country who did not have that upbringing. For me, I felt a little bit like I had to prove myself. I didn't like the stigma that, oh, you're from OC. You have, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. I wanted to prove to my friends that, no, of course I work. I work. I mean, I have this to show for it. And so I worked through college because I just really liked being able to say, I make my money. I can fund these things on the weekend because I make my own money. And I think there was a level of respect among my peers for that because a lot of people from Orange County who were at that school didn't, work instead just kind of partied all weekend. And I had a sense of, responsibility. I had to go work. Oh, I'm going to go open on Saturday morning. I have to work right after class. And I just really enjoyed that sense of responsibility and just being able to make my own personal money at the time.
hmm I want to go back actually a little bit to like high school and even before, like your social life as a young kid and as you like went through high school and college. How were you in those years? Did you have a lot of friends, select few? Did you enjoy like your early childhood in school?
I had an interesting elementary and high school experience, I would say. I mean, it's not uncommon. I was a very friendly person. I was also a very generous person. And I was a pretty easy target for people to be mean to, I think. So, and one of my earliest memories is third grade flag deck, a girl comes up to me and tells me that I'm disinvited to her party because she's invited too many people. And I'll just never forget that feeling. And that kind of then set the tone for the next few years. I was always more and more generous and more friendly towards people. And I think that just came as a threat to a lot of girls at that age. So I had another experience in sixth grade where a group of my really good friends decided to, in front of a lot of people, disinvite me to a concert. And I'll just never forget how that felt. So that was, there are multiple instances like that. So I ended up making new friends with a different type of crowd, more of the artsy crowd and the kids that weren't the considered, the cool kids, which was fine because they actually accepted me for who I was. And going into high school, I was very much in the art crowd, the drama crowd. I thrived in that because I realized that I wanted smaller groups of friends, but actually friends who cared about me. And I'm already seeing with my own kids. I mean, my 4-year-old told me that one of her friends says she can't come to her party. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this starts so young. And I mean, I can remember third grade. I can only hope that my kids don't remember 4 years old and 5 years old and the mean girls, that it's already coming out because it really shaped me. And I think that, you know, part of that was, proving that, no, I'm a really good friend. I can do this and I can help you in this way. And I just think that sometimes people are just not prepared for someone to be so positive and helpful that they think that that's like a threat and you have, an ulterior motive, even at such a young age. So I had to, really work through that, even in high school. And then in college, I'll never forget, I ran into one of my high school bullies, and it was as if she never remembered that part. And that's the thing that always gets me is a lot of these people are in your life for such a blip of time, but leave such an impact. It kills me that that can stay with you for forever,
Yeah.
but not stay with them at all.
Well, and it's interesting because it's like, there's some quote about like whether we're looking for it or not, like we take in feedback from other people. And it's like you can get like 100 pieces of positive or like neutral feedback, but then like two pieces of negative feedback, and it can
Yeah.
just make everything crumble if you're not like continuously really working on that, just inner bank of confidence and self-esteem. So at that young age too, it's like we learn how to manage negative feedback or filter it by getting it,
Yeah.
and not doing that the right way when we're young. And it's crazy how much of an impact that can leave. But then it's also it's nice to grow and look back and have that moment with someone who's like, oh my, she doesn't even remember saying those things to me that just I took in, and
Yeah.
sat with for so long. And it really like, she didn't really even care that much. It was probably just a freak thing that she said, and it didn't mean anything. I love that you're a mom now, and looking at your kids kind of being in these situations too. My daughters are not quite at the age where they're like they're just starting to understand like what is a friend.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you parent that, And you want to protect your kid from a lot of that, but then it's also like, well, it's also kind of it's part of the learning,
Part of growing up,
you know?
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't shelter them from everything, unfortunately. And you have to let them be exposed to, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And the only thing you can do is hope that they can come out of it with coping skills.
Well, what I think is really interesting too, when you're talking about some of these things and moments that you remember, that your response was really to be like, that's incorrect, and to be like, I'm just going to be really helpful and kind as a response, and that's not necessarily a natural reaction when we feel a little bit attacked or misunderstood. A lot of people will shut down or attack back or retreat, and just go the other way. But I think it's kind of a really special and telling response that you were like, "No, okay, like, I dare you, to continue to feel that way about me because look how much I can help you or look how kind I'm gonna be to you regardless." And then having that full circle moment where you're almost like rekindling some of these relationships and rewriting them in a way just by choosing to have your own spin on what people gave you even at an early age. Even those things they did stick with you. Your response in the moment was pretty inspired.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it fuels me. It still does. It's like oh, you don't think I'm good at this? Well, guess what? I'm going to go and learn about it more and then excel at it because I know I can. It's very motivating to have that. And although it was not great at the time, I still look back at those experiences and I hope that my kids don't have to go through exactly what I went through, but it did shape, my own personality and make me feel like, well, I'm just going to kill everyone with kindness and just do whatever I can to be as helpful as I can and not give them a reason to say anything negative.
Yeah. Our whole company is focused on confidence for young women and how we can kind of reshape and really train ourselves in that area. And a big part of, our coaching is teaching that confidence isn't something you arrive at or a quality that you get and then you have forever. It's practice. It's a thing we practice every day. And it comes from like the word actually breaks down to mean self-trust. So it's like, how many instances can you do something that inspires you to trust yourself? And it seems like even the repetition of those, more negative interactions with other people, but then also being like, no, like this is how I'm going to respond. And next time it happens to me, I'm going to do the same thing. It really kind of, without even realizing it, you're building up this self trust and your ability to kind of face those not so positive interactions and keep moving forward. So I love to kind of point that out because we always wonder like, okay, you're clearly a confident, successful person now. But it happened over a lot of time and maybe even without you realizing you were doing that for yourself. So I want to talk a little bit about your career and how it sort of blossomed. Clearly you were drawn to the more artistic kids in an early stage of life. You had something more in common with that type and you're in a very creative field now. But, in your bio, you mentioned that you didn't come out of the womb saying, I'm going to be a photographer. Can you tell me a little bit about like what you visualized for your life from an early age, if anything, when you were really young?
I think because of my experiences with Mean Girls, I always wanted to help other people, and that was always in my mind. I spent a couple of summers in college interning for an investment bank in New York City, and I met a whole new group of new friends, and I just really thrived living in the city. And so I knew that after college, I wanted to live in New York, and I just thought about what that might look like. So I had a job offer from this investment bank, and then I also, at the same time, applied for a program that basically puts you into a middle school and you're a teacher without a teaching credential at the time. And you're basically working towards getting that credential. And so I was at this crossroads and I ultimately decided I wanted to try the teaching part. And that completely changed the trajectory of my life. I worked in a middle school in sixth through eighth grade in the city.
Wow.
It was amazing. I was able to walk to work and work with kids who, grew up in a city and grew up with, taking the subway to school. And it was exactly where I wanted to be. I had one experience with a child who wrote an essay about being in a drive-by shooting. And I was so taken aback that I asked the child, like, did this really happen? And she said, yeah. And I thought, gosh, why is she like not getting counseling? I was so shocked. And when I questioned, the school therapist and the teachers, it wasn't something that was taken that seriously. So then I thought, okay, I want to do something more. So I applied for my master's in social work, NYU, on literally on a whim and got in. And then I thought, okay, well, now I'm in a master's program. So I was teaching and also in a master's program. And as part of that master's program, I was a high school social worker in two different high schools in the city. One was in the city, one was in the Bronx. The one in the Bronx was the last stop on the train. And I was working for a program that was a relationship abuse prevention program. So I was working with high school students that had either been exposed to domestic violence or needed some sort of therapy in a high school environment. And I'd also teach a relationship abuse program in class to them, which was very eye opening and also just empowering as I was one of the only white women on campus. And for me, this, 23-year-old woman coming up and standing in front of a group of high schoolers who clearly weren't listening to what I was saying was just a real test of confidence. And through that experience, I saw that the principal there decided, because that school was just not a great school, decided to do an elective surgery and didn't really care about the trajectory of her school. So then I thought, what else can I do to help? So I thought, I'll be a principal. So then I applied for another master's program, and it was educational leadership at NYU. And fortunately, I was able to shadow my previous principal from the sixth grade school, which I had a very positive experience doing. But in doing so, I realized that so much of what a principal does is testing and money. And I didn't get that hands on student feeling that I was really craving. And so in the time that I would be on the train to this school in the Bronx, I picked up a DSLR camera, just a digital camera that my sister had at the house, and I taught myself photography. It was my outlet for all the stories that I was listening to, and I just couldn't get enough. So my walk consisted of walking across Central Park every day, and so I would bring my camera, I would take pictures, and I had this. It was like this light switch went off because in my head I had already seen the photo that I wanted to take, and then when I was able to capture that, it was like, this is what I want to do. So I would, in all my free time, I would be on YouTube. I would learn the ins and outs of the camera. I picked up a film camera. I learned how to shoot film. I went into a dark room and I learned how to process film. And it was just something that was for me like electrifying. Absolutely fell in love with it. All at the same time of, finishing these two master's programs. And so then I thought, what am I going to do now? I built up this friendship with a group of wedding photographers in California because I knew eventually I would move back to California. So I got a job in San Francisco working at a private school. And that's kind of where my light just shut down, like for education, especially private education. I was more about selling a school than working with kids. And I really just wanted to focus on what was giving me life at the time, and that was photography. So I'd built up this group of friends, all women my age, who were wedding photographers. And when I left my job in private education, I said, I will be your second shooter for any wedding, this summer. So I second shot about 40 weddings all across Northern California, which was just incredible because here I am, never, shot a wedding in my life. And these girls who are my age are taking me under their wing, and I'm just thriving in this environment. And when I lived in New York, I would post on Craigslist for clients. I would say free photography, I'll do headshots, I'll do your wedding, I'll do this. And at the time, Craigslist definitely wasn't as sketchy. So I didn't feel terrible about meeting someone in the park. And I had a great experience with every person I worked with. And it was just a way for me to just keep honing my skills. And so when I lived in San Francisco, I, shot. And then I thought, you know what? I want to move back home. San Francisco is not my city. So I moved back home and I continued serving clients across the country, being paid, shooting weddings, then meeting my husband, getting married, and having my first child. I was 8 weeks postpartum, pumping in a bathroom at an 8-hour wedding. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Gosh.
What is this? Like, what is this? So then I thought, okay, I can't do this. I can't do weddings anymore. And at the time I was still shooting families and I love that. So I decided to scale back weddings and focus on my family photos. At the same time, starting this landscape photography business, because for me, landscape photography was my true passion. I loved the fact that I could take a picture of whatever I wanted with no one talking back to me, no one saying no, and then just producing a work of art that someone would say, I want that in my house. So I built two businesses at the same time without really trying. And for me, that felt very successful.
Yeah. I love hearing you go through this path because there are definitely like several turning points where you had to kind of look and say like, okay, like what's lighting me up? Like what's working, what's not? And then you edited and you edited and you edited. And it's like obviously editing is a big part of what you do in a very literal way, but then also there's this way that you've done that in your own life or like where's the light, right? Like where is the light coming from? And photographers are always working around the light. I see that you did that very metaphorically in your own life. I smiled when you were talking about that first moment, standing up in front of a classroom where you felt like a, you know, not that much older than these students and very different from them. When we first started Meet Bridget, it was just called Bridget at the time, I started it as a nonprofit, and we were doing all in person, like, workshops and things, and mostly with underserved populations. And there was one that I held in front of, it was a group of incarcerated teens that were on probation and at a special school. And I so vividly remember going in because I was doing everything for free at the time because I was like, I can't charge anything for these for what I'm doing because I have to prove that it's worth value first. And I'm just starting. So I'm like, I need to prove to myself too that this is valuable. But I remember standing up in front of that group and I was like, all right, sink or swim, girlfriend. And I was so terrified because I wasn't that much older than these girls, but it was so beautiful because it's like I just started trying what I testing my philosophy, right? And doing my workshop and trying to see if what I believed would work. And there was a turning point where it's like I would see kind of, the guards go down and then suddenly we're all connecting and we weren't that different and the girls are connecting with each other. And it just, when you were explaining your kind of teaching experiences and what parts really fueled you there, I felt like I could really connect to that because it was motivating, but also just such a challenge. And there were parts of it where like we had this learning where I was like, okay, actually we're not a nonprofit because running a nonprofit isn't really about just the work that you do. It's about raising money. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want to just be spending all my time asking for other people's money. Like I want to create something so valuable it makes its own money, and had to make that pivot, So it's like in that journey of like going through and having to like find the things that are lighting you up, but then also like as you're changing and when you shifted more and more into photography based on what was kind of working for you and what wasn't. I think it's so interesting because do you feel like although education was clearly a very different career path, I have this fundamental belief that anything that you try or do, even if you stop and you switch or whatever, it continues to inform what you're doing today. Do you feel like there are parts of that career experience that inform what you do in your photography?
Oh, definitely. Just with my social work experience, my therapy experience, what I have found that marries both is that I like to work with students, and it started by accident, but I like to work with teenagers and kind of do phototherapy with them.
Cool.
Right now, in the age of social media, like everyone's just taking their selfies and TikTok, and it's so photo related, and these kids don't have any photo training, but yet they can take a picture and edit it, manipulate it through these social media avenues. So I started working with teens who were having issues in high school, similar, bullying issues or, have depression, and they just couldn't function in a high school environment. And so I would work with them one off and teach them photography and kind of empower them through photography. And that for me is my end goal, is to be able to work with kids, teach them photography, and then at the same time show them that they can master something, they can make something beautiful, and that their work counts. Because I think that so many teens are just looking for approval and they want people, now at this point, it's just they want likes. And I'm just wondering how that evolves over time.
Yeah.
And so I think just instilling the fact that you can create something and it's special and it can be your own, and kind of work through whatever feelings you're going through at the same time. They don't realize it's actual therapy. It's more like, oh, I'm going to just learn photography. But at the same time, like things just come out organically. And that's something that I've found I want to spend a lot of my time on, is phototherapy with kids.
That's so cool because I feel like that's something probably a lot of people have no idea even exists, but when you think through it, it's like taking a photo. I mean, I think in our social media world and everything, it's so much about like, okay, what's in the photo, like what's it wearing, what's the makeup look, what's everything, how do you put it together? And then you just snap the photo. But really like being behind the lens is capturing a moment in time. It's sharing, it's taking your unique perspective, and then just encapsulating it for a moment, freezing time. It really is a very like artistic and personal and even spiritual thing to do. So I love the idea of kind of taking it back. It's like this isn't just for like you're not taking the photo to get the likes. Like take the photo to capture your perspective, and to
Yeah, to be intentional.
yes, have a real moment and kind of just taking it back a little bit more old school than this like fast photo, instant image AI even, world that we're facing sometimes. Obviously, every photographer has to edit to some extent, and editing in a way can be part of that, that perspective process. It's like taking a picture of a sunset. It's like you look at the sunset, you take the picture, and you're like, oh, the picture doesn't look quite like what I'm seeing, So sort of getting it more close to what your mind eye captured. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you view editing?
I absolutely love editing. If I could spend hours on my computer, I would. It's actually one of my favorite parts about photography because when I take a photo, I already in my mind know what it's going to look like in the end. And so to achieve that, that's like, okay, mission accomplished. I can do that. So editing a photo, and at this point, you can manipulate a photo however you want now with Photoshop and AI. And I think if I looked at my work from 15 years ago versus now, where I heavily edited before to now being a little bit more clean and intentional about my editing style, the difference is vast. But I think I've honed my landscape photography to reflect a certain coastal cool look, and my portrait photography to kind of reflect what it feels like in the moment. If I'm shooting a family on the beach, I want to show what that beach really felt like to me. I don't want to just blow everything out and make it look whitewashed. And I want to show the colors. I want to show the warmth. I want to show, the excitement on their faces when they're running through the water. And then in the studio, I absolutely love being able to manipulate light and to just, take a photo of someone and know that I've empowered them to be their best self in front of the camera. So many people walk in here and they're like, oh, I'm really terrible in front of a camera. That's fine. I am too. But you just need someone who knows how to pose you correctly to see where your best angles are and to kind of, in my mind, I look at someone and I think, okay, I know where they're nervous about getting their photo taken. I'm going to manipulate them in a way where they're moving their body so that their best self shows. And so then when they see that photo after the fact, they're like, oh, wow, I look great. That's what I love with the post production, the editing, because I can show you, hey, look, we just took this photo and this is what it's going to look like. And then they just get so excited.
I can totally attest to that because that was truly our experience shooting with you. I mean, with my background and stuff, it's like I've had some experience, in front of the camera. But Kashia, like, she looks incredible in front of a camera, but she definitely didn't have like comfort level that I did. And you made her feel so comfortable right away, and you were just affirming in the right moments. And to me too, it's that I feel like behind the camera you have an ease, and just a sense about you. You know how to kinda say the right thing at the right time, and a little nudge, but not so much like, "Tilt your head a little more, and freeze," because I've worked with that kind of photographer too, and it's like, I'm so not acting natural, and it's not gonna look natural, on the on the other side of the lens. We came to you, our brand, like, colors and sort of feel from the beginning, there's black and white has always been a big part of what we do, and we think it's kind of funny because, um most of our conversations and topics are really anything but black and white. We talk a lot about the gray area and the sticky parts of life and confidence in those teen years, but we like that black and white kind of imagery in what we do. So I like mentioned that to you and I was like, I hope this is coming across, but you had this like great idea. Obviously, we did a lot of just the color photos in black and white, but then you did this whole cool series at the end where you were like, I have this vision, so I'm going to change the light this way. And I knew that you were just getting it and vibing. And the photos that came out of that chunk of what we shot, you could tell like it was something you visualized before you even set the camera up. And that was so cool
Yeah.
experience.
I just absolutely love getting inspo. So when you send me a Pinterest board and I see your images, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to create this. Oh, but then how can I play off that? And then I go on YouTube, I download workshops. I just look at the way other people have done the lighting and then I think, okay, I'm going to mimic that in this shoot, So sometimes it's trial and error, but sometimes it really works out. And I love it when someone is open to being creative and not stuck in a specific vision. Like, of course, I will capture that for you, but also let's do this because I think you might actually like it. And most of the time, those are the photos that they like the most.
Totally. Totally. Tell me a little bit about, so you set up these businesses, creative businesses. I think that creatives are often very interested in, but also confused about, like the logistics of setting up a business, like a photography business. Where did you kind of learn to be like, okay, one on one, if I'm going to set up a photography business, two of them, or starting in wedding and then kind of splitting off. Um, where did you kind of go to learn the logistics of behind the scenes, like getting your business set up, getting licensing and whatever else you need to do as a photographer?
Google was my best friend. YouTube was my best friend. I literally learned everything through, the way other people did it. Getting my business license. There was a time where I actually had the idea to make my own camera straps. And so I started a camera strap business where I had camera straps produced with leather, and that was its own business. And then I had my landscape photography business. So I just kind of learned through the internet, honestly, and then find a good accountant and get a business license. And then that's exactly how I started. And I love the fact that I didn't have a studio. I just got a studio about a year and a half ago. So before I was remote and I could just take my work anywhere I wanted.
It's so cool. And I think that the way you kind of break it down is like, well, I looked it up.
I just wanted to do it, so I looked it
Totally.
up.
Well, and I think that sometimes there's this pressure on creatives that it's like, oh, in order to like be a successful creative, you have to be so original and artful. And it's like everything's derivative. It's like look at the way someone else did it and then put your spin on it because it's like the way you see it is going to make it unique. Like no one has
Yeah.
the same perspective as you. So even if you're trying to rip off what someone else is doing, it's going to be different because it has your touch. So it's like don't get caught up on having to make everything brand new and unique from anything that's ever been made because it's like the market isn't really looking for that, you know?
Yeah. And I just found different ways to expose my artwork. When I lived in the city, I answered an open call for photographers for a local framing gallery. And then I had my art on display and there was like opening and I got to invite friends. And it was very exciting to have a pit stop when someone came and visited me. I could say, oh, let's go to this gallery. My artwork is on the wall. So that was very exciting. And then from there, when I moved back to California, I applied for the John Wayne Airport art program. And after a 2-year wait, I was able to have my artwork at John Wayne Airport in various terminals in the lobby. And so that was, super fun. And then, I am always trying to get my work out there. So I answer whatever open calls I can. And that's kind of how my landscape business took off because people would see my work and would say, oh, I want to buy that. Where can I buy that? And so then I thought, well, I have to have a website and I have to produce these things. And then I got the attention of a few local interior designers and they said, well, I want to sell this to my clients. So then I had to work on what's trade pricing. How am I going to make a profit? It was a very trial and error type things. A lot of times I lost money because I didn't know how to do my, business correctly. And so now I feel like I'm pretty streamlined and I am consistently trying to make new, design relationships and show people my work. And so half of my studio is a gallery. So I have framed photos on the wall of my work and it shows, how I frame, how I mat, how something could look in someone's house. I'm constantly trying to get my brand out there and show people how it can work for them. So fortunately and unfortunately, social media is like the biggest, part of that. And I'm a pretty busy mom. So having the time to even pick a photo to post on Instagram every day, it just seems like such a daunting task because all my photos are my babies and I don't know which one to post and I don't know which one's going to get the most likes, but there's always someone out there who likes them. So, it's exciting and it pushes me forward. And, having a designer reach out and say, hey, by the way, there's this beach that my client likes. Do you think you could go take a picture there? And so I say, okay, yeah, no problem. So I'll fly my drone, I'll take some photos, send them a gallery. The client gets to pick what they want. It's
Well,
custom. That is like so fun for me because I get to put my own creative spin on the photo that, where they want. And I have a lot of say in how, it gets reproduced. So for me, that's very special.
speaking of, being a busy mom, having 3 kids and being an entrepreneur, really it's your name on the door, which kind of, being a working mom is one thing and it looks a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. But I think especially like having your name on the door of something like where if you stop working, your business essentially, apart from the sales of some of the prints and stuff that I guess you could keep doing if you weren't actively promoting it and stuff. But It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of responsibility to keep it going. What are some things that just help you be a great mom while you're running your business?
I think just the fact that I've exposed my kids to the fact that I work all the time. I mean, they know mom works and they come into my office and they see me working, they see me editing, and they're interested in, what this button does and what this button does. And they come into my studio, and a lot of the times I ask them to model for me before I, do a shoot for someone else. And they just know that mom works. And for me, I love that because I love the fact that they know that their mom goes to work and she, is working for the family. And I explain to them, okay, yeah, mom works and this is mom's time at work, but then when mom's home with you. And we prioritize, them knowing mom's always there. Mom's going to go to the basketball games. And of course, during my busiest season, it's holiday season. That's when mom works a little bit more than mom usually works.
Yeah.
And mom can't make it to the basketball game, but it's definitely always a balance. And I know when I'm working maybe too much and they need me a little bit more. So I think it's for me, it's always, I'm constantly learning what's going to work, what's not going to work. But the basis is I want to show my kids that I have a really good work ethic and I want them to have the same. I want them to be able to sit down, do their homework, and think about, what their life is going to be like, when they're in college and after.
Yeah. I feel like I struggled a little bit trying to figure out like how can I possibly be a great mom and also really dedicated to these goals and ambitions that I have. And my mom was like, "Well, it's having balls in the air and like you're always going to be dropping one of them a little bit." But she's like, "If I can tell you anything, it's just like when you're choosing to be somewhere, whether it's at work or with your kids, be there. Like you've already made the time to be there. Be there all in, and when you make time for something else, like don't waste time on regret or am I missing, time with my kids or am I missing this, career thing I could be doing? Like just be where you choose to be. Um, and I feel like that's helped me a lot. It's like that sense of, this is what mom does and mom does come back, and I am
Yeah,
here for
mom
you.
always comes back.
And this is part of what helps me be all here for you. It makes me, everyone has a different mix of what they need to be, their best selves. And I genuinely believe that it's like part of the work that I have chosen to do really, when I really immerse myself in that work and I come out and then I'm with my kids, I feel like I'm such a better person for them too.
No, and I tried to find ways to integrate myself into their lives with my business. And so I go into their classrooms and say, I'm going to photograph, the kids today and have a theme so that they see, oh, mom's working in my class, with my friends. And then they
Well,
have a sense of pride, like, that's my mommy taking your picture. That's exciting to me as well. And, people say, what do you do to relax or to just unwind? And for me, it's honestly work. I just love the editing part of it. I just love being able to sit in front of an image and just manipulate it to a way where I'm like, "Oh, that makes me feel like I was back there."
yeah,
So for me, work is my unwind and it's my energy. I just absolutely love what I do.
I love that. Well, with that, I'd love to shift to we do like a fast 5 questions where you just answer whatever comes to your mind, and then we'll move towards our wrap up. But I'll go ahead and start with the first one if that's okay with you. Number 1, do you have a morning routine?
My morning routine is wake up, make the kids lunches, make myself coffee, and get them to school.
It really is. I feel like the morning
It's very
time,
efficient.
it's much shorter. I'm like, "Oh, I wake up and then I meditate." I'm like, no." It's like wake up if I can, possibly slightly before the kids, get some coffee in my system, like, get them going. I love that. Real mom life. Number 2, if you had to pick, what is the favorite photo that you've ever taken?
Oh, wow, that's a really difficult one. I can't choose a baby, but one of my favorites is a drone photo I took of a snorkeler with a turtle right in front of her that she didn't see at the time. And for me, that was just very special to watch, nature interacting with humans. And it was a very powerful photo for me.
I love that. I'm gonna have to look that one up. Number 3, what is the biggest piece of advice that you have for someone that's making a career pivot?
Look up any person that does what you want to do and research how they did it. And then throw yourself into workshops, find a Facebook group. I found that finding Facebook groups of my passions and my interests was the best because you're connected with so many people and they have so many ideas and you're really able to educate yourself in an unconventional way just through that. You make friendships that way. but literally throw yourself into what you love and just educate yourself. Take whatever class you can.
Boom. Number 4, explain in detail if you have like a editing setup, like certain things you need, certain time of day you like to edit. How do you kind of get in the zone?
I would say my time of day is while my kids are at school. And my setup, I literally have my setup in my closet at home, which is nice and cozy and dark, which I like. And I put on my favorite Spotify channel, which is usually Hipster Cocktail Party.
Yes,
And I just get in the zone. I could be there for hours. Just if I don't have a shoot that I'm editing at the time, I will go back to past images that I've shot, either rework them or try to start submitting more for my website.
I love it. Okay, so question number 5, have you had anyone particularly influential in your journey that comes to mind immediately, a mentor, someone special?
I would say this group of female photographer friends that I found them through blogs at the time 12 years ago. That was like the height of blogging. And so I met a group of female photographers who were all connected in some way. And I introduced myself. And when I moved to California, I met some of them from Northern California. And then I just basically integrated myself into their group of photographer friends. And I would say that was probably one of the more influential groups of people I met because I'm able to bounce ideas off of them. They're all female businesses. They all came up at the same time I did. They're all the same age as me. So we collectively have grown up, have gotten married, had kids, and all have businesses now that have evolved over time. And some are still wedding photographers and some have become just family photographers. And it's just very special to have that kind of a connection. And it was something that I didn't stumble into. I was intentional about making friends who were doing what I wanted to do.
I love that. And that's such a good tip for someone really trying to find an inspired community. Well, our last question that we always like to ask is, what is something that maybe you didn't take pride in about yourself as a teen that looking back on you're very proud of now?
I would say probably just getting through academic probation and recovering my grades and finding myself through college and then going on and doing what I found the most passionate about, which was education at the time and social work and working with children. And I think me going through academic probation and then that basically putting me in my place and then going now into education and being able to work with kids one on one, I was able to relate a lot more to what their struggles were in school.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Ari. This has been such a treat. For our audience, where can they find you if they want to see your photography? I know we have arimophoto.com and Arimo Fine Art. Where can they find you on social media too?
So on Instagram at ARIMO Photo, ARIMO Photo, and at ARIMO Studio, ARIMO Studio. Those are my two different Instagram pages. One is for landscape, one is for my lifestyle and family. And website wise, it's www.arimofineart.com and www.arimophoto.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everything, Ari. This was such a treat.
Thank you, Asha. I really appreciate being on here. It was like such a treat for me to be able to go down, memory lane.